Hi, I'd like to share one of the most powerful stories that I've ever heard in my life. It's a true story, and I heard it 30 years ago, and it has really helped me in my life, particularly at times when I felt a great challenge, times when I felt things felt really hopeless, futile, impossible. And this story really empowered me. It really helped me to shift out of that state of futility and hopelessness and to move into possibility. And it's a story about the power of possibility. It's also the story about what one person can do. It's also the story about what one action can do. And finally, it's a story about the power of laughter. I had heard the story many years ago, and it was very helpful for me after I heard the story to tune in one night to Larry King Live on CNN when he used to have a show on CNN. And Larry King had on 4 of the survivors of this experience that I'm going to tell you about. And so they talked firsthand of their own experience of this story, which made it even more real for me. And on another level, this story has a lot of meaning for me because when I was right out of high school, my brother and I, the most exciting thing we wanted to do was to go to Europe. We wanted to see how people live in Europe and in the rest of the world. And the first place we went in Europe, in France, the first country, was to a concentration camp. Well, it was in Germany, but we drove from France to Germany, and we went to a former concentration camp, Dachau, that had been preserved. And all I can remember about why I went at that young age was that my brother and I wanted to know if this had really happened, if humans had really done this to other humans. We wanted to know if this particular story was true. And sure enough it was, and we spent the whole day. It was a very somber day, but it was a very powerful day for both my brother and I. So this is a story about the Nazi concentration camp, and it's the story of a French surrealistic poet named Robert Desnos. And Robert Desnos was thrown into a concentration camp in Eastern Europe during World War II. And he was there for many years. And over the years, they had seen these trucks pull up and take some of their friends and family. And their friends and family never came back. So they knew that when these trucks arrived, that was the end of their life, the end of the road. And one day these trucks pulled up and they were herded into the trucks. And the trucks drove for quite a while until they came to this large area with a huge hole the size of a football field. And the prisoners were told to line up single file at the edge of this huge, deep hole that had been dug. And they could see at the bottom of the hole there was fresh dirt, and they could even see a few skeletons. So they knew that this was a mass burial ground intended for them. And then the soldiers stood in a long line opposite them and cocked their rifles in the position to shoot. Of course, at that point it was very somber and very quiet. Not even the guards were talking. And then at one point, out of this total silence, a very enthusiastic, energetic man, Desmond the poet, started running for one of the other prisoners, and he grabbed the hand of one of the condemned men. And he started to read the fortune of this condemned man. He started to go, oh, you have a long lifeline. You're going to live a long, prosperous life. Oh, you're going to have many children. And as he started to read this very fortuitous fortune of this condemned man, everyone became quite uneasy. And eventually the other prisoners shifted and they started to want to have their own fortunes read. So one by one they came up to Desnos and offered their hand and had their fortunes read in a very similar way. And he foretold a new wife, a prosperous business, much travel, many children, great happiness, great wealth. So as Desnos continued to give these very good fortunes about the future, the whole situation became more and more surreal. And it's fascinating because he was a surrealistic poet, and he had created a very surreal scene. I mean, here they were lined up. They were basically skeletons themselves, and they were lined up in a row, ready to be shot and fall into this pit and to be buried with the other skeletons already in the grave pit. And so that was part of the scene. The other part was there were all these skeletons, all these prisoners on the edge of death, laughing with joy, with hilarity. A lot of the laughter was from tension, from the surrealistic sense of what was happening. But eventually it just burst into a kind of raucous joy. So it was a very surrealistic scene at that moment. And this really, of course, caught the guards off guard. The guards were very disoriented. In fact, they were very young, these guards. They were teenagers, because this was near the end of the World War II, and all the older, able-bodied men had already gone to war and were killed or were on the front lines. And so all that was left to guard the concentration camps were young teenage boys. So these inexperienced young soldiers did not know what to do with this preposterous, surreal scene in front of them. And what happened was their world got paralyzed, and they could not complete the execution. So instead of shooting, they put their guns away and they herded the prisoners, the laughing, raucous prisoners, back into the trucks and drove them back to the barracks. A few weeks later, the Allies liberated that concentration camp, and Desnos and his fellow prisoners were all freed. So one can see here that the imagination of this poet saved his life and many other lives. His action, his spontaneous action from the heart, from imagination, inspired from wherever it was inspired, the spirit of possibility. His action allowed them all, the prisoners, to step out of the world created by the Nazis, of the concentration camp. And in fact, it was so effective, his action was so effective in creating a new reality that the soldiers could not even continue in their reality. They succumbed to the new reality. So this shows us the power of one person. It shows us the power of possibility. It shows us the power of one action from the heart. So right now, in your life, where have you given up on a situation or a condition? What aspect of your life might feel hopeless, might feel futile? What are the possibilities you can't imagine? And right now, are you willing to be open to the possibility that something could happen that you've never imagined? Are you willing to be open to the possibility that something new and different and amazing could happen? Thank you.